Welcome to Asian American Parenting, a podcast from Rooted Ministry and the Solid Network, where the gospel meets Asian American faith, culture, and parenting. Each episode, we explore how to raise the next generation with a strong gospel foundation in Christ while navigating the unique challenges of our cultural identity. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in. Welcome to Asian American Parenting, a podcast from the Solid Network and Rooted Ministry. I'm one of your hosts, Danny Kwan from Rooted Ministry, and this is my co-host, Monica Kim from the Solid Network.
Good to be here.
Good to be here, Monica. And Monica is a biblical counselor and psychologist, and I was a youth pastor for 29 years before joining Rooted as a senior director of content and cross-cultural ministry. So today, last time we talked about generational trauma, and today we're talking about another real heavy subject called the Sandwich Generation. And some of you might have heard this sociological term coined by Dorothy Miller. And I just want to illustrate what this term means to me. My dad, 2009, was suffering from colon cancer and, pancreatic cancer. And my wife had colon cancer. But it was really, really tough for him. And he had to go to the hospital almost every day. Pancreatic cancer is very aggressive. My mom was holding down our dry cleaning business. And so it became all up to me to take him to the hospital for radiation, chemotherapy, doctor's visits to specialists. And I was in ministry at the time at a church full time. I was doing PhD studies. I had 3 young children, and it was really, really hard for me. But I felt this urge and obligation as the son in my Asian family to take care of my father, take care of my mom by taking him to the hospital every day. But then I still had my wife and kids. I still had my church, still had my PhD program. And in between this, I was sandwiched between obligations to my parents and to my own family, and especially my children. And as Asian American parents, we have these caregiver responsibilities to our own children, and also oftentimes a lot of us have responsibilities to supporting our parents who are slowly turning into senior citizens over 65. And so, Monica, how would you talk about and define maybe the Sandwich Generation?
I think you gave a very good example of that and defined it well. And I think I would, add on. Not only are you feeling that pressure and the obligation and the desire, there could also be a lot of experiences of shame or guilt, or even anger or frustrations, and that's not uncommon to every culture in the midst of this experience of being the sandwich generation, both taking care of your parents and also obligated to really be there for your own family and your children. Uh, I think I would also add that while that experience is very common for all cultures, there could be an added experience, like you said, of the filial kind of obligations that may be more expected from the parents, let's say,
Hmm.
from an Asian American kind of a context. Some parents might not expect it, but there might be a unsaid expectation or hope from parents,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and that being because of the kind of uh, culture that we all come from. So I would say that that would have another added layer to it, is that there's an expectation from the parents in a
Mm-hmm.
particular kind of way of uh, you know, honoring
Mm-hmm.
uh, without it being talked about
Yeah.
or being said,
Yeah.
with specific ways. And I think about that when I think about you. I remember that time when you were in the midst of caring for your dad specifically. You didn't even have a conversation with your mom, right?
Yeah.
Your mom didn't even ask for help.
Yeah.
She just expected that you would be doing it,
Yeah.
that there was a natural expectation, that not to kind of think about, not that she wasn't thinking about your situation, but she simply thought how important it was for her to take care of the business on behalf of your dad. But then there was, again, no kind of description or discussion about then what happens to
Yeah.
everything else. It just kind of naturally fell on you.
Yeah.
And so there's this almost natural way in which it falls on you to take care of things. And that's really hard
Yeah.
when that happens. I would say that that is a little bit of a cultural aspect. There's a bit of a cultural aspect to that.
Yeah. And for Asian Americans like us who are parents now, who are sandwiched in between our older parents and raising our own children, there's not only like sickness, but like financial burdens of taking care of our parents, but also our own children.
Hmm.
Time strains, and where our time and efforts and allegiance lies. Um, Emotional support for our parents versus our own children, and just feeling the lack of support in general when you're stuck in between these situations, and how do you deal with them, and how do you prioritize self-care and spiritual self-care and mental care versus trying to care for your parents but trying to care for your own children. There's all these dilemmas that are going on. And again, I think you put it well, of the aspect of shame, of honoring your
Hmm.
parents, but also wanting to take care of our kids. And where does that all fit in? So I'm just trying to paint a picture for our listeners of where this all falls into.
Hmm. I appreciate, yeah, you continuing to build that kind of picture or understanding of the experiences. I think one of the priorities or hope, one hope for us in the midst of talking about this is just to be able to learn how to talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to acknowledge that there is this real pressure that's going on in the midst of being a sandwich generation.
Yeah.
And we just want to share stories of how we can also identify with that too.
Yeah.
I do think that there isn't an easy answer
Yeah.
in the midst of it. It is so complex in terms of how you navigate through those kinds of pressures, and it gets so messy also. Again, our hope is that we could be able to talk about it and make something that feels invisible more visible,
Mm-hmm.
so we can talk about the kinds of experiences that we have
Yeah.
as we look for greater community support and ways to uh, pray for one another in the midst of it.
Because in my case, the solution wasn't like, okay, Dad, just go ahead and die. I have to take care of my kids.
Hmm.
But sometimes, although my dad was a great father, it can get so frustrating and like I'm neglecting my own children that you kind of feel like that's the reactionary response that I want to do.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
or sometimes, because you and I are married, I'll put all the children responsibilities on you and
Hmm.
everything at home on you, and I'll go do everything for my dad. And that's
Hmm.
not fair to you either,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
Or examples of couples where, you know, the parents are need financial support, but you have a mortgage, car payment, other things to take care of for your own
Hmm.
family.
Yeah.
And what do you do about that?
Yeah. Those are really, really hard questions. Uh, one thing that comes to mind is as I remember us going through all of that, rather than, I think it's important to identify who can you seek um, uh, help in light of being able to work through all of that. We certainly talked about it in different ways uh, to be able to let's say with the children when they were very young and you've had to spend days not only at work in addition, not only did you have taking care of caring for your dad, going to do ministry work. In addition to that, there were your studies that you had to tend to too. While that then did bring a lot of pressure on me to kind of hold down the fort, I think what was helpful was when we were able to talk about uh, how we care for each other in the midst of it, and
Hmm.
how we can understand the different kind of pressures that we feel and the impact of those obligation as a sandwich generation,
Hmm.
uh, person. And so I think that's really important to know how to talk to uh, one another, whether it is how to talk to your siblings who are helping you with your parents, along with having to take care of your child, right? How to talk to your spouse, if or a partner or somebody who is in that situation with you to some extent,
Hmm.
and how do you come together and uh, what would uh, being non-judgmental
Yeah.
and warm and supportive to one another look like? So that's really important. I know that when my siblings, we were trying to think about how to help my mom, who is taking care of my dad, who had Alzheimer's,
Hmm.
while we were also all um, having to take care of our own families. It was so important that we all, as siblings, learned how to talk about it and start the conversation,
Hmm.
not in a demanding way, but in a humble and honest way, exploring all the different ways in which we could um, possibly uh, think about support and resources.
Yeah. And you kind of touched on this earlier about community support.
Hmm.
And again, maybe because I am so Asian American, older, kind of, thinking, although we're a collective people,
Hmm.
at least in my Korean culture, we don't want to burden other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Budam, it's
Right.
called.
In the
And
Korean word.
yeah, in the Korean word. But I found that your support from my siblings, and support from the community, like people at church,
Hmm.
people willing to do meal chains. Again, I never knew what a meal chain was, but once people started doing it for me, I was like, oh, I want to do that for others. Is
Hmm.
there ways that you're thinking about this idea of seeking
Yeah.
community
Yeah.
support and help?
Yeah, I think you said it really well that oftentimes as Asian Americans, we may have been taught not to burden others or not to ask others. But the way then it comes out, is that we are so stressed that we might start to get more frustrated or angry, or there's a lot more pressure and you feel actually much more alone. And being able to push through that because of who God is to us,
Hmm.
that He bears our shame and our burdens with us. And then being able to ask, or again, pushing through the shame to say, here's where I need help
Hmm.
from, whether it's to the church or to the family or to, community resources, looking for different ways for help.
Hmm.
I think that is something that we can continue to be encouraged to do as Asian Americans. Uh, that is something that's oftentimes hard for us to do.
Yeah, yeah. And then when it comes to us as parents in this sandwich generation, and dealing with the burdens of trying to take care of our parents, but also our own kids. I remember I was very encouraged to see this as a former youth pastor, but even in the Asian American church, like other parents helping parents who are busy taking care of their own, adult parents, like driving the other, friends' kids,
Mm-hmm.
taking them to retreats, even,
Mm-hmm.
like one time the parents were so busy taking care of their own parents that the kid couldn't pay for their retreat because the parents were so busy. So the one parent paid, you know, for the kid until the parents could, not be
Mm-hmm.
as busy and things like that.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about ways that we can deal with the burdens of being a sandwich generation as Asian
Mm-hmm.
American parents to our own teenagers and children, um, despite having the
Mm-hmm.
burdens of taking care of our own
Yeah.
parents.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And I think the examples you gave are important examples. How do we be um, uh, unabashed and creative in the midst of such a need and a complex need where a lot of, you know, our Asian American communities have not been able to identify the more readily available resources for our parents to feel comfortable grasping onto also. So then being able to um, uh, uh, help one another in the midst of it is so important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, we're also thinking about, again, when we're taking care of our parents and it becomes burdensome and time consuming, the emotional stress that causes us in
Mhm.
taking care of our parents. And, what are some ways we might think about or recognize how then that's impacting our own children, our own parenting? And, this is a parenting podcast, but even our marriages,
Mhm.
how do we begin to be aware and think about it? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I think we are both recognizing there really is no easy answer. At the same time, what we have often come back to over and over again is while we're raising more awareness of the impact, the emotional, mental, physical toll of being a sandwich generation, uh, uh, that um, if if we can raise more of an awareness
Hmm.
of how that's impacting us, and how, in the midst of that impact, let's say the way that we might be physically, emotionally, spiritually, or psychologically impacted, to be able to then thoughtfully uh, slow that down and be reflective of how we can find, first of all, rest for our souls through our relationship with Jesus.
Hmm.
That is not the not, and I'm not. We're not saying that that's the easiest answer
Hmm.
for every problem. We're saying that's an important part of what we can do in the midst of such hard and complex and messy kind of issues. And in the midst of that, when, let's say, for example, when one is able to recognize, I feel a lot of guilt
Hmm.
from not doing more
Hmm.
for my parents. And because of that, you recognize, then you get more frustrated with your children
Yeah.
as you tend to them. Ugh, I'm being pulled on every which way. Why can't my children just be a little bit easier for me to handle?
Yeah.
Let's say, for example, that might start to make its way through. When you're aware of that connection and you're aware of that through the work of the Spirit giving you more insight into it, it really enables you to then find comfort in the Lord, who says to you how he knows how hard it is to take
Hmm.
care of your parents and to take care of your children.
Hmm.
How he says that we are not alone because now we have been united to Christ.
Yeah.
How can we sit with that deep comfort in the present time in order to feel the lifting of the guilt for a moment, and then be able to find hope as you step into parenting, and then be a bit more patient with your kids,
Hmm.
and then to step hope into recognizing you can't fix it all for your parents,
Yeah.
and to be able to pray for specific things.
Yeah.
So it gives you ways to step into one thing at a time
Yeah.
when you sit with an awareness of how to run to Jesus over and over again.
And I guess that's the most practical, pragmatic answer, and gospel hope answer. Because I'm going to bring up one last subject, is this financial burden and stress. And I think the gospel hope that you have just offered to us is the hope that we have. And listeners, there's no one solution or answer to this, but I'm just thinking about sometimes our parents needing some financial help
Mm-hmm.
And, we have to support our own children.
Mm-hmm.
And, how do we reconcile parenting our kids responsibly, being good financial stewards for them and taking care of them, and then our parents ask for some financial help
Mm-hmm.
or money.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, I don't think in 1 minute you can give the perfect answer, but, there is a way to at least communicate with your spouse
Mm-hmm.
and your siblings
Mm-hmm.
about the financial burden that you're all facing as
Mm-hmm.
children of your parents, but
Mm-hmm.
also that we all face the need to take care of our children,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
to not let it overwhelm you, but find hope in the gospel,
Mm-hmm.
and to
Yeah.
really again be able to talk about sensible options
Mm-hmm.
with your partners like family and
Mm-hmm.
community and especially your spouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything you would add to that, Monica?
Yeah, I think you covered it really well.
Yeah,
That there is really no simple answer
yeah,
and one right answer, and I think what's important is how uh, people engage one another in the midst of it.
yeah,
Because oftentimes when people will come in with what one thinks is right or
yeah,
wrong, right? There might be this idea that this is a right and this is a wrong
yeah,
way to approach it. I think it's important to recognize there isn't a right and a wrong necessarily,
yeah,
um, but it can actually be important to know how to come together to understand each other's hearts and burdens and how to then come up together on the very important and creative, diverse ways they can address this issue of finances
yeah,
for the sandwich generation, the burden of the sandwich generation,
yeah, yeah,
in a godly and wise way.
yeah, yeah. Well, the last two episodes ago, talking about generational trauma, and today talking about the sandwich generation and how it affects our family and parenting. Can we smile and just, because I know I've been really serious and maybe look tense on these episodes, but there is truly hope in the gospel of Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
and that
Mm-hmm.
we encourage our listeners to embrace the whole hope and joy of the gospel
Mm-hmm.
and believe that it's true, powerful, and transformative. Continue listening to Asian American Parenting, and thanks for listening to today's episode.
Thank you.
We hope that you have enjoyed this podcast. For more resources, visit the show notes. See you next time.